Before we can continue with our code, we need to create a class of Firebase user. This is going to be a custom class that we are going to save our user and load our user. So it's going to hold all the values of the user. I'm going to call mine an F user, which is Firebase user. So let's go to my select any of the files here, Command N. I'm going to create a Swift file here, click next, and I'm going to call this F user. For you are going to have this file ready in assets folder, so you can just if you want to create a file, you create and copy everything from it to here, or if you get the ready file from the assets folder, you can just import it to the project. What I'm going to do is to copy all the content of my FUser class here. 1 second to scroll down everything here, and yeah, here it is. So I'm going to copy and paste everything here, and also we need another file here. I'm going to just in a second explain you what's going on here. Command N for new file, Swift file, and this one I'm going to call constants. These are two big files, so I don't see any reason why you should spend all the time and type this information. So I'm going to provide these two files ready for you. These ones are going to be empty strings for now, because these are my old project keys. Alright, yeah, that's it. Let's quickly go through the constants file. What we are putting here, we are importing Firebase and Firebase database, and we have some default keys for, so every time I don't have to type, for example, user did login notification, we can get these public variables by just tapping, and Xcode will autocomplete. I have break down these things into sections, so this will be our app keys. For example, for Firebase file reference, for one signal app ID, since we are using this for call function, and app URL is this will be used where our application URL on App Store. Then we have Firebase headers. This is the general headers for our Firebase directory, Firestore. So we have user, we have typing, the recent chats, the messages, the groups, and the calls. Then we have FUser section here. These are all our variables we are going to save in Firestore. We are using this so I don't have to type every time object ID, created, updated, email, because if you do a typo here and in any of these variable, you are going to crash the application when you are loading user or saving the user. So it's very handy to put them in constants here. And we have our background images. We are going to save them to user defaults. Max, these are message numbers, max duration for audio and video messages, how many seconds we are going to have. Then we have these recent chats. All these variables are related to recent chats. The contacts, message types, we have picture, text, video, audio, location. Coordinates, longitude and latitude. Message status, delivered, read date, deleted. Then we have the push. We are going to use device ID, and for our call we have an incoming call, call ID, caller full name, etc. So this is our constants file, and then we have our FUser here. We have our class of user, then we have the standard variables that belong to our user class here, and we have our standard initializer, which we are using our objects here, giving the objects to our function to initialize our fuser, and also we have initializer using an NS dictionary. So simply we are passing a dictionary here, and it initializes an fuser object from a dictionary. This is handy because all our users that we are going to save in our Firestore here are saved as dictionaries. So we don't have to create a fuser passing in using this function here. So we just pass the dictionary here and it will take care of the rest. What it does is when we are passing a dictionary, we want to check if some values are in place, otherwise we are going to set them an empty strings so it doesn't crash our application if some of the values are not present. For the dates, I'm checking if the date is present, then the date format. If it's less than 14 characters, it means there is something wrong with the date format and it's better to create a new date there. Okay, then we have the name, first name, last name. The full name is combination of first name and last name. The avatar, again, we check if we have all these values, otherwise we set them to an empty string. And for the contacts or blocked users, we are using an arrays. So if we have no values on our dictionary, we are setting them to an empty array. Then we have some return functions. We have two of them actually. The first one is returning the current user ID, which checks the user that is logged into our application and returns its current ID. And the second function is returning a fuser object, which is our current user that is logged into our application. So once we call these two functions, these are class functions, so we don't have to instantiate our class first to initialize and then we can call these functions. These are class functions and we can just call them straight away on the class. Then we have some login functions here. So we have login with email and password. What this function will do is we are going to provide an email and password, and it's going to log in, or it's going to try to log in, and if it's successful it's going to return our user. So it says get user from Firebase. So we are going to, as soon as the user logs in, we are grabbing this user ID and we are downloading an user class that we are going to save this to our database. You will see what I mean here by when we start using these functions. I'm going to show you step by step what is going on there. And we have the register function. Again, we have register with email and password, first name, last name, and avatar. And this password, this function will take our email and password and register a new user and save this user. We're going to save the user locally as well as on the Firestore there. And we have phone number registration. This part of the code I'm going to comment out because we are going to use this later in our project, close to the finish of the project actually. We have logout functions. Of course, when our user logs in, we want it to be able to log out as well. So we have logout here. We are removing the user from our local user defaults once we log out. Then we're removing the one signal ID. This is for push notifications. Again, we will talk about this later when we start using it. Then we have a do and catch block here. So we are going to try to log out our current user and catch if there are any errors there. Deleting a user function here. Again, it's on a class function. We are going to call delete user and we're going to delete the current logged in user on the device. And then we have some helper functions here. This is the end of the class, and underneath we have some other functions. This is for saving the user. The reference here that we are actually getting an error currently is for our we are mixing actually one thing. So I'm going to just a second. I'm going to add this function. Let's open a new file here, and I'm going to call this collection reference. It's a Swift file. And here we import our Firebase, and I'm going to have f collection reference here is just an enumerating. We are returning a string, so we have our user, our typing, recent, message, group, and call. So these are the titles of our, let me open my ready application here so you can understand what we are talking about here. So these are the main collection titles, so what we are going to have in our project. We can have call, groups, messages, recent, typing, and user. So we, in order to access this level of collections, we are going to get a link to these collections, and this is an easy way so we don't have to type them all over and over again. And we have a function that returns a reference. So we are passing an f collection reference here, which is a string basically, and an enumeration. And this returns a full path to our location where we are going to save in our Firestore our data. This you will understand later on once we start using this. It will make much more sense to you. I'm going to command B to build my project because we have some errors in my fuser class here. So we have, let's see how many left. Still shows 10, so let's see what are the errors here. Alright, so we are missing the date formatter, and we're going to fix it now. So what I'm going to do is to create another file here. I'm going to call this again Swift. I'm going to call this helper functions. This code again, I will provide this file to you so I can have it ready. So again, we have for now one function here. It's returning a date formatter. So every time we want to save something to our collection, to our Firebase, we can save only simple data there like string. So when we have a date, we want to convert it to a string and save it to our Firestore. And then we get once we get a dictionary from our Firestore, we want to take the string and convert it to date using the same date format. So this is a standard class that we are going to use for it. Let me build my application again to see how many errors we have left. Alright, it was successful, so everything is ready for us to continue.